Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome back to the Onyx Tavern Vlog series on Russia Sentai ToQger. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, and today let's talk about station number 38, Let's Make a Movie. Now, this episode is plain filler. There isn't anything really special about it. There isn't anything that contributes to the overall storyline or anything of real significance here. It's designed as a fun adventure romp with no consequences. And for that, I really can't say that it's good, and I can't say that it's bad either. But I will say it's a very bizarre episode, and not for the reasons you may think. It's not got the most unusual things happening in it, and while there are some unusual aspects of this episode, it's the subject matter that they are satirizing, I guess, or parodying in some way, that kind of strikes a chord with me. Not in a negative way, but in a way that just really kind of confuses me on a lot of levels. So let's talk about what the episode is, and I'm going to talk about the episode in general, just give you a few interesting things I picked up from it in regards to the characters and the plot. But then I want to kind of dive into what the episode is really kind of satirizing, making fun of, if you will, or paying homage to, whatever. Because again, I still can't figure it out. But I think it's that part of the episode that I think when you look back at ToQger as a whole, again, this is a skippable episode in that it offers no interesting anything for a lot of the characters or the plot, but just what it does with its subject matter is kind of unique in a way. All right, what's the plot all about, basically? So, ToQger end up at a station that happens to be right next to a movie studio, and they go to the movie studio in hopes of getting a tour here. And during the process, they actually find out that, hey, the entire cast and crew is missing, so let's make the movie ourselves. And everybody takes a job, and, they switch between, camera and acting, and yada yada, and all that stuff. Only to find out there was a plot by the Film Shadow, they thwart his plot, and the day is saved. The end. And it really is as simple as that. You really can't go too much deeper into the actual story without, again, getting to what I feel is some sort of commentary on the film industry as a whole. But before we actually get into that part, I just want to make a couple of points about the actual story itself. First of all, Hikari is the smart one yet again. This is kind of an episode where the characters do revert to their childlike selves. I mean, they are being swept up in the fact that, oh my goodness, we're in a movie studio. Look at this. Oh my god, it's movie stars. We get to act in the movie? That's going to be awesome. And that's completely in character. And of course, completely in characters, Hikari is the one who doesn't buy the BS that's going on and is very suspicious of what's going on here. As a matter of fact, in the opening scene of the episode, they're fighting against the Film Shadow, the villain of the episode, and he just ends up, leaving in the battle, quoting, film structure, narrative structure, as the reason why he must go. And after that, they find the producer that was being attacked by the Film Shadow, and the, for ToQger, they're like, oh my god, it's the film producer, can we go see the studio? And Hikari's like, what about the Shadow Monster? Aren't we going to go after him? And it's just kind of like, yeah, why don't you go after him? And Hikari, apparently ToQger are a democracy in the fact that when four of them get a harebrained idea, it doesn't matter what Hikari thinks, he's got to go along with it. And what is interesting in this is that everybody gets swept up in this whole film aspect, that when Hikari is putting the pieces together on what is wrong and what's happening here, he actually has to don this Sherlock Holmes-like costume to convey the information to the ToQger on what is happening, for them to actually listen to what's happening. Because he's playing everything straight, but he has to go out of character in order to get them to go ahead and listen, which I think is kind of a great idea. Yeah, they're morons for doing it in the first place, but again, they are children, so you have to put that in the back of your head. Anytime the ToQger do something stupid like that, you gotta remember they're 8 years old at heart. They have the mind of 8-year-olds, an 18-year-old body. So that's essentially what's happening, and you just gotta go ahead and roll with it. But the fact that Hikari actually has to remember that and actually do that, I think is creative on his part, at least. The only other interesting thing in regards to character here is at the beginning when Kagura's talking about movies and everybody's telling him what their favorites movies are, everybody's kind of, given a movie that is kind of an insight into their personality, and I don't think would necessarily go against anything that's been pre-established. And what I actually do like out of this is that when they go to the conductor says, I love action flicks. And that actually does give us an insight into the conductor's personality based on what has come before, and unfortunately, what has been spoiled for me that is upcoming. So basically, when he says he likes action movies, what kind of triggered in my mind was this is a guy who wants to be a hero. Somebody who likes action movies often puts themselves in the roles of the action heroes because up until, I guess, recently, what have action heroes really been? They've been your normal, everyday guy who gets into a situation, has to kind of make the best of it, and, hey, save the day, and I get to be the hero for once. I mean, the best example, I guess, would be like Die Hard. You got John McClane in there, who, yes, he is a cop, but he is kind of your average, everyday guy, nothing particularly special about him, but he's able to overcome his personal problems and the lack of shoes and thwart a group of terrorists. I mean, that's basically what he does. So a lot of people do put themselves into action films as being the hero because, like, he's an everyday guy, I'm an everyday guy, therefore I can do what he does. And the way this relates to the conductor, what we've seen in the past, is that when he did go ahead and get the sixth morpher from the terminal, he wanted to be the sixth ranger. He wanted to be our orange ranger. Because he's like, it's my duty to do it, I have to go ahead and do it. And of course, through circumstances, Ticket ends up becoming the sixth ranger, and of course, the morpher eventually goes to Akira. And he's really disappointed by that because he wanted to be the sixth ranger. And when you put in this little nugget of information just saying he likes action movies, then I can see that he wants to be the hero. He wants to be that person who goes out there and does the fighting. He doesn't want to be the guy on the train with the puppet, sending them gear and weapons or giving them strategies. He wants to be out there fighting and making a difference. And I'm not going to spoil anything because unfortunately it was spoiled for me. This gives light into what will eventually happen to him later on at some point. I'm not going to say when because I'm going to spoil it for you guys. But when I think about those two different events and what is said in this episode, I really like it. I like what kind of insight we are getting into the character of the conductor, that he wants to be that hero, and I like that. I always like characters who want to do more. I mean, this is the same thing we had Cam with Ninja Storm, is that Cam wanted to be more than just the technical guy. He wanted to be a ranger, and eventually he became a ranger. That was, his arc. That's what he wanted to go ahead and do. Will it work out with the conductor? We'll see, but the fact of the matter is it really works into his personality. A couple of other notes I just want to go ahead and point out. When the monster attacks with basically the CG of the bombing planes and the UFO and the T-Rex, it gets Takachi, which is, a callback to the previous episode. I really like that. I think it was a good use of special effects. It's something that's unique in the episode that we don't really see in any other Sentai, and I can't think of another time something like that has been used in any other television show or movie. Not even Power Rangers, which, they take effective use of CG more so, that I would say, than the Sentai does a lot of times. But that's about it in regards to the actual episode itself. Now let's get into like the filmmaking aspect of this episode, because again, there's a lot of commentary and satirization on the film industry. Now, first of all, I want to preface this by saying I am not an expert on film. However, my degree is in film and photography. That's what I went to school for, and I spent, 4 years learning how to write and make and act and direct a movie and do all that kind of stuff. That's kind of my bread and butter at this point. So I would like to be able to say to you guys, I'm going to offer an informed opinion, but I'm not going to offer an expert opinion. But I just look at a lot of things that are said in this, a lot of things that are shown, and I just kind of laugh. I'm like, that's great. That's hilarious. What are they saying about that? That's the part of the episode that got me going. It's not what the ToQger are necessarily doing that revolves to the plot, but just all this different film aspect stuff. Because I've toured studios, I've looked at sets, I've seen directors, I've seen actors. I mean, I know these people, and I know kind of what's going on. And when I look at this, it reminds me of all those people, those places I've been. Even reminds me of films that I've worked on, the film I directed in college, films that other people have directed, and it's just a good commentary on a lot of those aspects. For example, and actually, let's get into something that's just befuddles me to no end, and this goes a little bit into the character of Kagura. So basically, when the actors are there and they're like, there's no crew, we need to finish this movie and so forth, Kagura volunteers to ToQger to take all the different roles and so forth. Takachi is working the camera, Wright is working slate, and Mio, and bless her, she is doing the sound, on-set sound capture with the headphones and the sound box and the boom pole. Three out of 4 years of college, that's pretty much what I did on set myself. So Mio, is brave. Anybody who's willing to do that for a film, that's an instant A+ in my book right there, because that is hard. It is a thankless job, and when the sound isn't right, people go nuts over you. But when it is right, nobody really says a thing, and nobody cares. You say on set, "Shh, quiet! I hear this. What is that in the background? I hear something leaking." They don't really care, but you try to do your job, and I digress on that. But again, Mio, you are great for doing that. But then Kagura comes in dressed as a 1940s male director. She's got the pink megaphone, she's got the sunglasses, she's got the hat, she's wearing the vest, and she has a fake mustache. Why is her vision of a Hollywood director, or excuse me, why is her vision of a director that of a 1940s Hollywood male director? Now, I'm not saying that, male directors didn't dress like this in the 40s back in Japan, or the 30s, or whatever era. I'm trying to narrow it down, honestly. But why does that come to mind for her? I don't necessarily get that. Why does she have to wear the mustache? Why can't she just be herself? Why does she got to put herself into this role? Now, granted, we've seen with her that she's had the imagination that she imagines being different types of people. She being a super girl, being a brave girl, and all that kind of stuff. But she doesn't even do that here. She just walks into the role of being a director without doing that imagination kind of thing. And beyond that, she also sabotages the entire production. Basically, the film within the episode is that you got two journalists who are breaking a case on a couple of Italian mobsters, and they get embroiled into the gang warfare because of the story that they're doing. I'm sure there's a movie out there that is exactly like that somewhere, and I don't know if it's parodying a Japanese film that's like that. Maybe there's an American film from the 50s that's like that, but I'm not quite sure myself. This episode does have an interesting fascination with film noir and Hollywood in its golden age, and I'll get more into that here in a second. But she doesn't understand the idea of what type of movie that you're making. And it's a hard-boiled, detective movie. It seems like gang warfare, gangster film, or whatever you want to call it. It's something that's being meant to take serious and being played straight. Her notes to the actors are, smile more, wear these pretty costumes, you need to look cute. And it ends up with, what looks like an 8-year-old stage play. Bunch of guys in cute costumes saying cutesy dialogue and dancing and spinning and smiling. I mean, heck, she wrangles in Takachi and Akira later in the episode, and they're both wearing wigs and everything. And of course, there are actually many very good lines of this episode, and one of them is Akira just in that costume going, I do not comprehend the meaning of this. Which I think needs to be on a t-shirt somewhere. It needs to be on somebody's t-shirt with him in that costume just saying, I do not comprehend the meaning of this. Because that's something that I wish I could have on standby, just like that clip to, put on anytime I put on certain films or TV shows. I want to go ahead and have that. But she basically sabotages the whole thing. Now, the interesting thing is, at the end of the episode, or during the second act, before we actually get into the big action sequence before the last commercial break, Kagura goes into talking about what makes a film. And it's, surprisingly, it's not deep. And actually is contrary to what the film industry is doing, obviously, because she's not jaded by the film industry like so many people are, myself included sometimes. But her statement is the films are meant to make people happy, and that's the direction she goes in this episode, is that she's taken this film that's being made about gang warfare and two journalists and turning it into something that would make people happy, or make 8-year-old girls in Japan happy, which is, I'm assuming, where she's coming from, because she's thinking of what makes her happy. And I'll get into how that's kind of contradictory in a couple of aspects of the Shadow's ultimate plan and so forth. So, Kagura just, I don't think she understands anything about film. She doesn't understand anything about movies, and yet she's put in the role where she has arguably the most control over the final product. I mean, whoever this producer is, and I can't be bothered to remember his name, whoever this guy is, he's obviously going to get fired at some point, because what ends up happening in the episode is that he ends up releasing the film with the original footage, the footage that Kagura shot, not to mention supposedly footage from the ToQger battle with the film Shadow. And everybody seems to hate it except Kagura. She's like, let's go see it. It sounds like a great idea. Perhaps the second best, or one of the best lines that is other than this episode, is by Kagura, where she's given commentary or criticism, constructive criticism from other people on the film, and her response is, we'll fix it with CG. That is her response. And I can't help but think, that's Michael Bay on average day, isn't it? You know, people come up with complaints saying, you know, Michael, you know, this Transformers movie is coming out all right, but don't you think we need to have a emotional scene in here, you know, where we orient the audience to what's going on and make them connect with our characters? And Michael Bay just goes, nah, we'll fix it with CG. That's what we'll go ahead and do. And more explosions over here and there. I don't care. Fuck the American audience, you know. That's my interpretation of Michael Bay, and I'm sure it's rather accurate. And I don't know who that was a jab at, or maybe it's just a jab in general about films and all that, which is ironic given ToQger and its use of CG. But it is just one of those lines. It's kind of like, yeah, that's another one that needs to be on a t-shirt and be given to film students. Just in general, say, you know, hey, fix it with CG, because you would not believe how many times I would hear something like that from a student film, where it's like, oh, we'll fix it in post. Yeah, that's never good. And the last quote that I have, and this is probably the best self-referential humor in the series in reference to film and all that, and just made me have to pause it because I was laughing so hard and all that, is Takashi, for his credit, because again, he's my least favorite character, but he said my favorite line in the series thus far. When they're having all these problems and the producer can't get Kagura to listen, Kagura's like, we'll fix it with CG and all that kind of stuff, and Mio's like, what the hell is going on here? Takashi gets this disgusted look on his face because he's the camera operator, and he just says, not my problem. And I can't stress how many times I've heard that on student films where something is going horribly wrong and somebody's like, it ain't my problem, I'm just getting a grade for the lighting. You know, that's all I'm doing. And even on Hollywood films, I guarantee, I mean, why do you think certain films got made sometimes? You know, it's like you watch a film and like, didn't the hundreds of people on set eventually say, that doesn't make any sense, or I don't know what's going on here, Michael? And yes, I'm picking on Michael Bay again. But you know, why? I always think to myself, like, you got 100 people working on look at every day. Why is nobody saying anything? And then this sums up, not my problem. I'm getting paid one way or another. You know, it's on the director. I'm just here to do my job. I'm not here to make a good film. And unfortunately, that is the truth of it. Here, this is what I said about being jaded and whatnot and stuff. So, just some great quotes on the film industry in general, and it just, I don't know if it makes me nostalgic or what, but man, just the things that they say in this, it's It's on the nose, man. It is on the nose. Um, okay, here is another thing I want to talk about. Is like this film seems to operate under the principle that movies are made the same way they were in the 1940s. Just by a couple of the things I say. I mean, first of all, there's this like idea of the closed set with the one security guard, and Ralph, the security guard here, isn't really doing much. I know there are Hollywood studios that operate similarly like that nowadays, and maybe some Japan studios do work that way. But it just feels like they kind of stepped back in time a little bit. True, they're using modern technology in there, but consider the fact that one of the main attacks of the film shadow is actually wrapping them in 35mm film. That's part of his attack. His design is based on those canister reels, and at the end, when he has created his ultimate movie, it's in a can, and when Hikari breaks it up, the film snippets fall out of it. And again, as I said, Kagura is dressed in like it's the 1940s and whatnot. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what these people are trying to say. I mean, because now here's an idea that I kind of thought was happening here is they were kind of like going behind the scenes on the ToQger set, whatever, and all that, and trying to save budget and all that. That was kind of like my thought, which is pretty much how And Action worked, except while And Action is the worst episode of Power Rangers ever and the worst season of Power Rangers ever. They're not really doing anything with showing us like how actual movie sets probably work and everything, but instead they're relying on stereotypes. Like I said, the film reel and all that, and then there's actually a film projector in there, which I'm sure they dug up out of a closet somewhere out of storage. And again, the way Kagura approaches how she dresses for the film and everything, and again, Ralph the guard there, they all seem like throwbacks to the golden age of Hollywood films, which is not necessarily a bad thing if that's where you're going for, but it doesn't really connect to anything. We don't have that overall visual sense. Maybe if the ToQger did go back in time and there's a 1940s film and maybe the film show is trying to interrupt one of the classic films that helped Japan out of the Second World War or something like that, or whatever the case may be, you could obviously do something like that, but they just have these elements that, again, just seem like stereotypes that look like, I mean, and I've already referenced it, it's like a Animaniacs episode. Basically, it's like the ToQger came onto an Animaniacs-style set on the WB lot, and that's how people view Hollywood, is that their view of Hollywood is still the golden age. They don't look at it as modern Hollywood anymore or any other period in between. They just look at it as that time of the silver screen and the brown derby and Citizen Kane and all. That's what they look at. And yes, I know the golden age of film is technically begins in the 20s and then mainly in the 30s, but still the 40s. I mean, it really has a 40s vibe to it and all that. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get technical, you can bring the dates down, but again, I just get the feeling they're trying to ape the imagery of classic Hollywood, but not doing anything particularly clever with it. And then I want to talk about the plot for the film Shadow, because his plot makes sense, to be honest, but not really in the whole context of what we're talking about in terms of film in itself. So what the film Shadow did is he basically kidnapped everybody who was involved with the film, tied them up, and basically took their nightmares, as he says, and puts them to film. Then he edits all their nightmares together into a single film that he plans to release. And as the film releases, it will create such panic and unrest in people that it will cause darkness to spread across the world. And that's not an unreasonable plan. I mean, well, frankly, this is the plan that Roger had in the James Bond parody on American Dad, is make a film where everybody cries and kills people and stuff. So it's a similar premise based on a parody, basically. But the problem with that is that when it's this film which has a monster title in it, which also it's a sequel according to the translation that I got from TV Nihon. But Kagura makes her stand that films make people happy, that they're supposed to make them laugh and make them smile, which again, as I stated, is to the way she approached making this film. But the film shadows film are going to make people sad and depressed and so forth. And I thought to myself, why doesn't the film shadow just make a horror film or only release horror films? Why is it that he has to create the nightmares of the pros of the business, basically, which consists of 5 people, it seems, based on the people he actually has tied up in there? That those 5 people's nightmares can bring destruction to the world. And again, the nature of a horror film, because, okay, first of all, I hate horror films. I don't get horror films at all. Maybe Nosferatu I get, but anything beyond Nosferatu I just don't understand. Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and damn Final Destination films, I don't understand those films whatsoever, because all they're about is death, destruction, how many people you can murder for seemingly no good reason, because there is no good reason why any of these people should die horribly in any of these films. And I stay away from them because, you know what, that creates darkness in me. I hate that kind of stuff. It messes with me. It honestly does. I can't stand horror films. I just really can't. But it's contrary to what Kagura is saying. So, again, his plot is to make a film full of darkness to make people's nightmares to consume the world, but we are already doing that with horror films. Again, wouldn't the plot be to destroy all the happy films in the world, and then all that's left is horror, and people just fall into despair, and that's all people will know, and the culture would be so desensitized to violence, or the culture would be so paralyzed in fear the darkness would be created? I mean, isn't that what horror films do? I mean, I'm going to get on my soapbox here. There is no damn good reason for a horror film other than to push the envelope of gore and special effects. That's all they're there for. They have no rhyme. There's no deeper meaning to horror films. And if you try to argue otherwise, it's a losing argument with me, because I have not seen a horror film that has made me think, has made me smile, has made me question things. The only thing I ever question in most horror films is, well, we've already introduced the concept of hell in this movie, so those people dying, are they going to heaven or hell? I can't figure that one out. It's stuff like that, but beyond that, there is no deeper meaning to any horror film. And again, you're not going to get me to change my mind, whether it's a Wes Craven or John Romero film, you're not going to get me to change my mind on that. The point being is that if they wanted to instill terror, just release horror films. And then the episode seems to be talking negatively about horror films even further, is where basically the film shout envelops them in darkness and subjects them to horrific imagery, supposedly. But it doesn't scare Kagura, and Wright makes a statement that horror film that isn't scary isn't worth watching. But again, I would argue that no horror film is worth watching. However, what are they trying to go ahead and say about horror films? That they're scary is being a good thing, but we're saying that nightmare films, or this nightmare film that he made, is supposed to be scary to put people in darkness. So which is it? I don't know what they're trying to say about horror films. And given that Japan is really big into these horror films, Ring and The Grudge, and, well, I mean, it's originally called The Grudge, but it was, I think, Recall the Ring or whatever. I'm trying to remember the exact title. Sorry, Professor Tillich, I know you'll be mad at me about that one. But whatever it is, I just don't know what they're ultimately trying to say about horror films in relation to this particular plot. And frankly, I just don't know what they're trying to say about the film industry in general. I mean, they've made some sharp comments about the film industry that I completely agree with, but I just don't understand the overall narrative, I guess. I don't understand how this all connects together. So what I'm ultimately going to say is, it's a typical skippable filler episode for ToQger, but it has commentary and satire on the film industry, which just doesn't really reach its potential or its peak at any point. Yes, you got some great lines of dialogue that should be, required reading for any film student, and Professor Joyce, I will make sure that you see those. But it's just, ugh. it's just there. I really don't know what else to go ahead and say about it because it is just a filler episode that means nothing ultimately in the end. So yeah, I'm just kind of disappointed is what it is ultimately what I'm going to leave you guys with. But I definitely want to know what your all's thoughts are on the subject. I mean, what do you guys think of it? I mean, I don't know what my percentage is of film students in this audience is, or people who are familiar with the film industry. But what were your all's comments on this episode? What did you all think about it? Was it just a filler episode? Did it mean more to you, or what? Leave a comment down below. But next time, we will come with something a lot more interesting. No, we are not doing the next station. We're going to hold off on Station 39 for a moment because falling somewhere in this continuity before Station 39 is the ToQger versus ToQger movie. And boy, is there a lot to say about that. So next time, we will go ahead and talk about the ToQger versus ToQger movie, simply because it does fall within the continuity here. So be prepared for that. So until next time, thank you for listening, have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.